Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to dive into a sequence of events that reignited excitement around the Golden State Warriors and once again placed the franchise at the center of NBA discussions. But before we fully get into everything that happened, make sure to leave your like and subscribe, because this simple gesture helps the content reach even more basketball fans and strengthens the community that follows every detail of this season full of twists and turns. The scenario that opened the door for this conversation was a victory that few predicted. The Golden State Warriors took the court to face the Denver Nuggets without three fundamental pieces of their engine: Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Chris Paul. The absence of players of that magnitude usually represents a huge obstacle for any team, especially against an opponent of Denver's caliber. Even so, what unfolded was a collective performance that caught the attention of analysts, fans, and league observers. The game was not just another win on the schedule. It symbolized something deeper: evidence that the roster possesses alternatives capable of sustaining competitiveness even when the usual protagonism is unavailable. This type of collective response is often the indicator that separates teams that merely participate in the season from those capable of surviving turbulent moments while still dreaming of something greater. During post-game analysis, the debate quickly focused on roster depth. Comments highlighted that despite the absences, the team displayed organization, defensive intensity, and offensive variety sufficient to overcome a fully healthy rival. The conversation then evolved into an inevitable reflection. If the team has already demonstrated the ability to compete under these conditions, what adjustments could elevate this level even further and transform competitiveness into a real threat in the playoff race? Within this collective narrative, one name gained absolute prominence for the way he responded to responsibility. Brandon Podziemski experienced one of those moments that can redefine perception around a developing player. After a difficult start in which shots refused to fall, the young guard showed emotional maturity by not disconnecting from the game. Instead, he remained aggressive, attentive to opportunities, and confident in his decisions. The fourth quarter became a stage of affirmation. Podziemski converted every attempt he took during that decisive stretch, accumulating important points and distributing assists that helped consolidate the lead. More than the numbers, what stood out was the way he built that performance. There were long-range shots executed with conviction, mid-range finishes demonstrating pace control, and rebound battles against physically superior opponents. Footage shown in subsequent analysis reinforced this evolution. It was possible to observe a player increasingly comfortable in reading the game, anticipating spaces, occupying strategic positions, and participating in different phases of possession. For an athlete still adapting to the highest professional level, this type of performance suggests a promising path. Another element fueling the narrative around Podziemski's growth was Steph Curry's influence off the court. Even without playing, reports indicated that Curry delivered a simple message to his younger teammate: maintain absolute confidence in shooting mechanics and do not hesitate on attempts. This guidance, seemingly basic, carries enormous weight when coming from one of the greatest shooters in the sport's history. The reflection of that mindset became evident in the guard's approach down the stretch of the matchup. While Podziemski represented the future under construction, Gary Payton II symbolized the importance of specialization within a consolidated system. Over recent weeks, Payton had been showing consistent improvement in three-point shooting efficiency. Across a 6-game span, his percentage approached levels considered extremely efficient for a player whose primary reputation has always been tied to defense. This transformation expanded his on-court impact. Known for defensive intensity and ball pressure ability, Payton also began offering offensive spacing, becoming an additional threat when positioned beyond the arc. This type of evolution is particularly valuable for teams whose offense relies heavily on constant movement and the creation of passing lanes. The plays analyzed clearly demonstrated this duality. On some possessions, Payton appeared cutting at the exact moment to receive passes near the rim. In others, he positioned himself on the perimeter, awaiting defensive rotation to execute quick catch-and-shoot attempts. Added to that were his rebounding presence and the energy that typically spreads throughout the group. The discussion about the role of rotation players gained momentum precisely because of this context. Teams that aspire to sustained competitiveness rarely depend exclusively on stars. They rely on athletes who deeply understand their roles and consistently execute specific tasks. The Warriors displayed exactly that characteristic in that matchup, with distributed contributions and evident collective impact. Among those contributions, the offensive production of veterans and perimeter specialists also stood out. A performance featuring multiple players reaching significant scoring totals reinforced the perception that the offense was not centralized in a single source. This balance creates additional defensive challenges for opponents, who must deal with different threats simultaneously. In parallel, names such as Kai Sotto began entering the conversation from a perspective of internal development. The Brazilian showed signs of consolidation within the rotation, something that often occurs when a player feels stability in minutes and trust from the coaching staff. His own statement that knowing in advance he would take the court contributes to confidence reveals a relevant psychological aspect of sports performance. Analysts observed that this gradual growth of young talents and complementary players helps build a more robust collective identity. The Warriors, historically associated with Steph Curry's offensive brilliance, are beginning to show additional layers of contribution. This multiplicity of production sources can become a crucial differentiator throughout a season marked by injuries, fluctuations, and physical wear. With the victory secured and individual performances analyzed, the conversation naturally shifted toward the competitive landscape of the Western Conference. The standings indicated that Golden State remained within reach of qualification zones, although a positive stretch would be necessary to transform potential into reality. Small differences in record separate several teams in this middle tier, making each result increasingly significant. In that context, news of injuries on competing teams emerged as additional variables. Temporary absences of key players among direct rivals can alter competitive balance and create opportunities for those able to capitalize. For the Warriors, this meant the chance to close gaps and strengthen their candidacy, at least for the play-in, with the possibility of targeting higher positions if consistency were maintained. It was precisely at this point that the discussion began to take on deeper strategic contours. If the team demonstrated competitive capacity even while short-handed, what moves could expand that margin of security? How could the coach be provided with more tactical alternatives to face different scenarios? And most importantly, what player profile could add value without requiring structural transformation of the already established system? These questions created the ideal environment for introducing a name that would come to dominate the remainder of the debate and open new perspectives on the franchise's immediate future. It was within this strategic evaluation scenario that the discussion took a new direction. The analysis ceased to be solely about what the Warriors had already shown on the court and began exploring what could be added to convert positive signals into a consistent trajectory toward the postseason. When Chris Boucher's image appeared on screens during debates, it became evident that the focus would shift to the possibility of an addition capable of complementing characteristics already present on the roster. The justification for this association began with a central aspect of Golden State's style of play, offensive spacing. Over the years, the team's success has been deeply connected to its ability to move the ball, generate synchronized cuts, and open shooting lanes through constant off-ball movement. For this mechanism to function ideally, every player on the floor must represent a real threat, including those positioned in roles traditionally occupied by centers. In this context, the idea of a big man with shooting ability gains enormous relevance. Boucher was presented as an athlete who embodies precisely that trait. With the height and wingspan typical of a paint player, he also possesses enough mobility to operate outside the perimeter and convert three-point shots regularly. This combination creates defensive dilemmas that are difficult to solve, as it prevents opponents from concentrating protection solely in the painted area. Footage displayed during analysis illustrated this concept clearly. In several possessions, Boucher appeared stationed in the corner awaiting ball circulation, ready to shoot as soon as the defense rotated late. In other situations, he surfaced after off-ball screens, creating space for quick rhythm finishes. This type of movement, when incorporated into the Warriors system, tends to enhance collective efficiency. The presence of a center capable of spacing the floor significantly expands the range of offensive possibilities. Defenses that choose to protect the rim become exposed to perimeter shooting, while those that extend coverage outside create driving lanes and cutting opportunities toward the basket. For a team featuring high-level creators and players specialized in off-ball movement, this balance becomes a structural advantage. Beyond the direct shooting impact, adding a profile like Boucher's could influence the dynamics of other athletes. Steph Curry, for instance, historically benefits when additional space exists to operate with screens and direction changes. Draymond Green, recognized for court vision and facilitation ability, would gain another reliable passing option in quick-read situations. Cutters such as Gary Payton II and Jonathan Kuminga would also find less congested routes toward the rim. However, the analysis did not remain limited to offense. The second major dimension of the argument focused on defensive versatility. The modern NBA increasingly demands that frontcourt players execute multiple tasks: protect the rim, contest help-side shots, switch onto smaller players, and recover position quickly. Boucher was described as someone who combines these abilities within an appealing athletic and technical package. Defensive clips reinforced that perception. There were help-side blocks, vertical contests without excessive contact, and rapid recoveries following switches. The combination of wingspan and mobility allows him to cover wide spaces and interfere with opposing possessions in various ways. For a team that frequently employs switching defensive schemes, this type of profile represents a valuable resource. One particularly highlighted point was the potential impact during minutes when Draymond Green is off the floor. Green plays an organizational role defensively, communicating coverages and coordinating rotations. His occasional absence can generate moments of disorganization. Inserting a player with solid defensive instincts and rim protection ability could help stabilize those sequences and reduce vulnerabilities. The discussion then evolved toward the third dimension of the possible fit: tactical flexibility. Boucher has experience playing both power forward and center depending on lineup composition. This malleability offers the coach opportunities to adjust formations without drastic substitutions. In bigger lineups, he can function as a spacer alongside another center. In smaller units, he assumes rim protection responsibilities while 4 perimeter players operate around him. This type of resource becomes particularly relevant in playoff series where direct matchups demand constant adaptation. The ability to alter game dimensions, at times prioritizing size, at others mobility, expands strategic repertoire and complicates opponent planning. Even during the regular season, such versatility allows quick responses to different opponent styles. While these projections were discussed, the team's current context continued influencing the narrative. Injuries and physical limitations among key players reinforced the idea that additional depth could be decisive. Steph Curry, for example, had been sidelined and still faced a recovery period ahead. The decision to prioritize the full health of the franchise's primary star is understandable, but it places responsibility on the rest of the roster to maintain competitiveness. In this scenario, the potential arrival of reinforcement would not be merely a strategic luxury, but a sustaining tool during critical moments. Maintaining consistent performance while central pieces gradually return is one of the greatest challenges faced by teams aspiring to reach the season's final stretch in strong condition. Boucher was presented as someone capable of contributing immediately without demanding a lengthy adaptation process. The upcoming schedule also appeared as a relevant analytical element. Matchups against teams experiencing different phases provide opportunities to accumulate wins and improve positioning. However, at 22 years old, a young Filipino center has been turning heads wherever he goes. With an imposing stature, refined skills for his position, and impressive body control, Kai Sotto is not just another player trying to make it to the NBA. He represents a rare combination of talent, size, and ambition, standing 2. 16 meters tall, he already carries on his shoulders not only the expectations of his nation, but also the promise of something greater, to become the next big name in Asian basketball on the international stage. Kai Sotto is much more than numbers and statistics. He brings a playing style that blends the traditional characteristics of a center with a modern touch of versatility. He not only protects the rim with authority, but also knows how to create offensive opportunities with creativity and court awareness. His offensive repertoire includes consistent mid-range shots, well-executed hook shots, and above-average court vision for someone in his position. He also shows strong defensive instincts, especially when it comes to contesting shots and covering sensitive areas in the paint. But when we talk about joining the NBA, and more specifically becoming part of one of the most strategic franchises in the league today, the Golden State Warriors, the game changes completely. The competition is fierce, the pace relentless. The physical and tactical demands are pushed to extremes that few leagues around the world can replicate. And it is in this context that the potential arrival of Kai Sotto to the Warriors roster becomes a fascinating prospect. The transition to the NBA is often challenging, even for the most experienced and highly rated athletes. Talent alone is not enough. One must know how to use it under pressure against faster, stronger, and more prepared opponents. For Kai, this would mean entering a new phase of his evolution as a player, where every practice, every minute on the court, and every decision during a game would matter. His history in international basketball, having played in leagues such as Japan's and Australia's, has already shown glimpses of his potential. However, the NBA is a world apart, and the true test is yet to come. Within the Warriors' system, Kai would have the opportunity to develop alongside some of the sport's most renowned names. With a coaching staff known for their ability to refine talent and an offensive system that emphasizes smart movement, game reading, and versatility, he would have the ideal environment to explore the upper limits of his development. Training daily with top-level veterans, participating in complex tactical schemes, and being tested in high-pressure situations would be decisive factors in his journey. But what truly makes this possibility intriguing goes beyond basketball. The cultural connection between Kai Sotto and the Bay Area is deep and symbolic. The San Francisco region and its surroundings are home to one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines. His arrival in this setting would mean much more than a simple signing. It would represent a point of unity between a globally renowned team and a passionate fan base eager to see one of their own shine on basketball's most prestigious stage. The impact of this union would be immediate. The Chase Center, home of the Warriors, would become a stage for not only sports celebrations, but cultural ones as well. Fans waving Philippine flags in the stands, cheers in Tagalog echoing during games, and a contagious energy coming from an entire community that would finally see itself represented at a high level in the NBA. It would be a unique experience for the franchise and for the league as a whole. Beyond the on-court effects, Kai's arrival to the Warriors would open significant doors in the commercial landscape. The NBA has been increasingly investing in the globalization of its product, and athletes who can connect different cultures become valuable assets for any organization. Partnerships with Asian brands, increased viewership in Southeast Asian countries, and new possibilities for digital engagement would be just some of the natural consequences of this union. However, one cannot ignore the harsh reality that accompanies any young player trying to establish themselves in the NBA. Even with talent, dedication, and a favorable context, the margin for error is extremely small. The Warriors' roster is carefully constructed to maintain competitiveness at the highest level, which means that every spot must be filled by someone who delivers immediate results or has a clear potential to evolve rapidly. If signed, Kai would have to prove in a short time that he is up to the challenge. His adaptation to the fast and physical style of the American League will be crucial. His reaction speed on defense, physical conditioning to endure the grueling schedule, and understanding of positioning within complex systems are all factors that could define his success or failure in the league. He will need to show that he can handle mobile power forwards, heavy centers, and defensive schemes that demand constant switching and effective communication. However, there is one factor that may work in his favor: his hunger to learn. Kai has already shown in his international journey that he is not afraid of challenges. He left home at a young age, faced different cultures, battled experienced opponents, and kept his dream alive even in the face of adversity. This resilience is one of the most valued qualities by teams like the Warriors, who prioritize players with a growth mindset. If the signing materializes, the rewards could be long-lasting. In just a few years, Kai could establish himself as one of the cornerstones of the Warriors' new generation of players, alongside other young talents the franchise has been working to develop. His presence in the paint could solve structural issues for the team, especially regarding rim protection and physical presence against opponents who play a more rugged style in the key. In a team that often relies on the precision of its shooters, having someone with his height and defensive instincts could bring even more balance to the lineups. Coach Steve Kerr's vision of the game, based on off-ball movement, quick passes, and intelligent defensive switches, would require Kai to make a continuous effort to adapt. He couldn't just be a big guy standing in the paint. He would need to be agile, have good game reading, and communicate constantly with his teammates. This ability to adapt to the team's dynamic rhythm would be vital for him to earn his place in the rotation. Off the court, Kai's image would also carry symbolic weight. In a league that celebrates diversity and inclusion, he would become the face of a new phase of Asian representation. Just as names like Yao Ming paved the way for future generations, Kai could take on that role for the Philippines and other Southeast Asian communities. His rise would not be solely athletic. It would also be cultural, emotional, and inspiring. Even with the risks involved, signing Kai Sotto could be a strategic move that yields significant rewards. The bet wouldn't just be on who he is today, but on what he could become in the years to come. And that, in itself, is enough to justify the Warriors' interest.